Meet Dan. Headstrong, argumentative, questions authority, wanders the room instead of working. The kind of student who appears flippant and unconcerned about his learning. The kind of kid who could drive a teacher crazy. The kind of person who wants it his way or else. Meet Donna, phone addict, headphones permanently wedged in her ear canals, vocabulary of an adult, a broken-hearted learner, the kind of student with so much potential, the kind of kid who's easily misunderstood by her peers, the kind of person who needs to be given a chance. I'm sorry. Meet Luke, angry, broken, defensive, resistant, and obstinate. The kind of kid who could pick a fight with a door. The kind of kid who may be gifted or may know nothing, but we might never know that because he won't produce. The kind of person who is broken so that he wants to break others. These are just 3 of my 29 fifth graders from this last year who were the target of my Space Lab design thinking project that I chose this last spring. In a sea of emails, Space Lab sounded like spam to me. I didn't teach 4th grade solar system anymore. I didn't need space. I didn't need any of that information, but I was intrigued by the title and opened it and saw that it was from CEI. I decided to ask some of my colleagues who had been connected with CEI about it, and none of them were applying for this, and so I questioned my intrigue, but I also knew that I was behind on this design thinking curve, and so I filled out the application and promptly forgot about it. Isn't that what we want our kids to do, is to identify what they don't know and then find a way to learn that? So I did fill out that application, and once I got the confirmation, I realized I had to get serious about this. We started design thinking with crafting a problem statement, and this one needed to have an education challenge. We needed to define the problem at an appropriate level without assumptions and focus on behavior rather than issues. Yeah, right. That sounds easy. My problem statement was so clear, and then not so clear, and then kind of clear. And I wrote it, and I rewrote it, and I rewrote it. But the heart always focused on students being empowered and willing to take charge of their own education. So in thinking about Dan and Donna and several others in my room, my problem statement became, students don't take ownership of their learning. We were given a discovery toolkit which was designed by Grid Impact for CEI, and there were a plethora of tools in this toolkit. My hope was to maybe land on 3 that I could use. In the end, I probably only had 3 that I didn't use. My first tool was to do some unfocused groups with my class, which seemed pretty okay with unfocus. I had to first design my identify my user groups, and I could identify 3 specific groups. I wanted to glean some information from them about what they like for learning a new skill, for practicing that skill, and then for showing their understanding. So I had my extreme users. These kids would devour whatever was put before them, and they could articulate what worked best for them. I would give them a menu of options. Nothing was optional for them. They did it all, and then they would go home and do more inquiry on their own. Email me in the middle of the night. I had my average users, and these kids liked choice, but they also were pretty comfortable in the traditional teacher-led classroom where a teacher made some decisions and then you just did them. They would find their work, they would get it done, but not a whole lot more than that. And then I had my non-users. These students didn't seem motivated to make choices or produce much work. When given their choices of work to do, they would wander the room, find it difficult to settle in anywhere, find it difficult to find compatible learners, and find it difficult to work on their own. Each group was sat at a round table for some discussion, and the other groups that were not involved were logged into something called backchannelchat.com. They each had a device, and they were taking notes on what they were hearing, and they were responding with their own thoughts as well. And this gave me a transcript of what was happening so that I could be present with the students who were discussing at the table. I had 3 main questions in this Socratic circle format with a little bit of an elementary modification. How do you prefer to learn a new skill? And they would discuss. How do you prefer to practice that skill? And how do you prefer to demonstrate your mastery of that skill? After each question, they did a card sort, and that was another tool that was in our toolkit. On index cards, I had written descriptions and titles of different strategies that we used, different online resources, paper pencil, 3D, just some different things that we used in the classroom, and then they were to rank them from their favorite to their least favorite. Important for me too to hear them defend their choices, because that gave me information about their engagement level with each tool. Along with that, I asked the students to each choose an independent activity so they could map their 5th grade experience, they could co-create their perfect learning environment, or they could choose to journal each day for a week their responses to their learning activities. I also was able to do some face-to-face interviews with about 1/3 of the class. I chose some students from each group who were mostly quiet during the group conversations and asked them to tell me what they liked and disliked about 5th grade, how they felt they were in their mastery of 5th grade content, and what they had learned about goal setting and self-advocacy as they head out into middle school. I needed to hear these individual voices as well as the group think. And this also gave me the opportunity, these independent activities, for them to choose, because student work is more authentic when they're able to choose their method of expression. So, once I read the transcript, looked at the card sort results, read through their individual activities, I realized that I had 2 ends of the spectrum with very similar preferences. My extreme users and my non-users were almost identical in what they liked and disliked. They all agreed that whole group instruction was not something that was effective for them. They all agreed that teacher-created videos met them at their point of need and gave them a pace that they could handle. They all agreed that if they got 100% on a pretest, they should be able to move through that content more quickly. And they agreed that 3D hands-on kept them more engaged. So then I had to grapple with what that meant for my 2 ends of the spectrum to be so identical in their preferences. If I'm truly personalizing their learning, then I needed to pre-teach some skills to those who are triggered by situations to either react negatively or just shut down and refuse to work. This led me to Dr. Ross Green and his collaborative and proactive solutions work. He's written 3 books that I have put my hands on. One, The Explosive Child, the second, Lost at School, and the third, Lost and Found. And his premise is that students need to be taught those work skills just like they need to be taught academics. Solving the problem isn't something for adults to do for the kids, but to do with the kids, to create a problem-solving partnership. And one of my favorite quotes of his was that if kids could do well, they would. Hearing from the students, I needed to listen and know that I didn't need to take what they said personally, except to make changes to my practice. What they liked and what they disliked. I can learn a lot from a 10-year-old. For example, another student, Tom, was looking for a pencil that had an eraser because his was done for. And I jokingly said to him, "Hey, Tom, if you would stop making mistakes, you wouldn't need an eraser." And he smirked at me and said, "How am I supposed to learn if you won't let me make mistakes?" Change is scary because what's familiar is safe, even if it's not the best. Change is scary if we're not sure what's coming. Change is scary if we don't know if we have the tools to be successful in the unfamiliar. But change is invigorating when we know what's coming could be even a tiny bit better than what we have. Change is invigorating when the unfamiliar is made safe. And change is invigorating when we can pick up one tool at a time and not the whole toolkit, and realize that success happens one step at a time. All kids are capable of knowing where they are academically and taking steps to move forward in their education. So I've decided that I will start each school year with some activity like this, so that I can start the year co-creating with and for students pathways that they can access. I've learned that even when they don't seem to want to learn, they really do. They want to be successful. As Dr. Green says, if they could do well, they would. My empathy for students who may not be able to express their academic needs and plot a course for themselves grew exponentially. So meet Dan. I can't look at his face. Determined, scrappy, questions authority. My son said, "Why would that be a bad thing?" Aware of his need for breaks. The kind of kid who could drive a teacher to think outside the box. The kind of student who needs to help design his learning pathway. And the kind of person who should help make choices so that school works for him. Meet Donna, music and game lover, knows what feeds her soul, vocabulary of an adult, one who doesn't give in to peer pressure, the kind of student who has so much potential, the kind of kid who's unruffled by what others think, the kind of person who thrives when challenged. Meet Luke, not looking at you. Turbulent, healing, protective, unyielding, steadfast. The kind of kid who will fight for what he knows is right. The kind of student who wants his work to be relevant. The kind of person who will advocate for wholeness for himself and others.